ownership of the rental could be like a bearer asset. If you have the fucking NFT, you have control of the house that you are renting. And if I kill you and take it from you, then it's my house now.
We could try that.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is Other Life. I am Justin Murphy. I just wanted to let you know that I write a free newsletter to thousands of people every week. It's where I publish my best work, I share events that you can come to, and much more. We have an insane private community around the newsletter, and it's free. Go check it out. Just go to otherlife.co. That's otherlife.co. When you subscribe, I'm going to send you a folder of PDFs that contain all of my personal highlights from a bunch of my favorite books that I've read over the years. So you'll get a million insights after just a few minutes of browsing these PDFs, really. They're really special to me, and I just figured I'd share them with you all. So that's otherlife.co, otherlife.co.
We were saying just before we started recording, you bought a Milady finally.
Yeah, two nights ago.
How much did you pay for it?
Like 0.72 ETH, somewhere in there.
This is like the only good NFT thing I've ever done, because I bought one at 0.1 ETH a few weeks ago. But then I was like, shit, if this goes to like 100 ETH, I'm not going to want to, I'm going to need one also if I sell one. So I was like, I'm going to buy another one. And so I bought one last night at 1.2 ETH. And already it's, let's see, actually, let's check the floor price right now. It's going to be a little out of date when people watch this, but
I didn't even like research it. I just aped into the first one that was available. So
yeah,
I like it. It's a good one.
I actually did research it. I have a Milady thesis. I've talked about it on this podcast, so I won't repeat it. But floor price right now is 1.4. So anyway,
almost doubled my money.
Yeah. So this is like the only smart NFT thing I've ever done. When NFTs like first got popular, I kind of stupidly like bought one or two idiotic things for like a point, 2 ETH or something like that, and they promptly went to zero. But yeah, so
you gotta buy it for the art.
yeah, right. Let's buy it for the money. Well, I buy it for Milady is like one of the first NFTs that to me has actually interesting, provocative, kind of cultural energy behind it. That's not just this like saccharine, lame, rainbow, smiley, GM, happy-go-lucky crypto veneer.
Mm-hmm.
The Milady people are like legit accelerationists, and I don't know anything about the founder, but they seem very smart. They seem a little bit dark energy. Like I'm kind of worried about Milady. I feel like maybe there's going to be mass shooters or something like that, citing Milady or something like that. But I do think that the Milady people have their finger on the dark truth of crypto anarchism, basically. And crypto anarchism is what I find most interesting about crypto. So it's like when I see them come around, I'm kind of like, all right, I got to buy one of these NFTs, and now I got to buy two.
Yeah, I kind of saw it as there seems to be a lot of relationship with the Urbit community. And so in some way, I think of it as almost like a leveraged Urbit bet. Like, it might perform out, it'd be like a 2x Urbit fund or something.
Yeah,
maybe Miladies will start the Urbit murder cult. We'll see.
No, I see it similarly too. When I see a creative group of any kind that is on Urbit or that pumps Urbit, like the Milady founder is an Urbit maximalist, legit. And when I see that, I do kind of increase the credence that I assign to the project in general. So yeah, there's that. So all right, Andrew. So you and I have been friends for quite a while, and so you live here in Austin now with me. You're a recent transplant, and a lot of people right now, it's super popular to talk about private villages and charter cities and buying land with your friends and building compounds and this kind of thing. It's very interesting to a lot of people at this moment, but not a lot of people actually take action to do this kind of thing. People like to talk about it, but not a lot of people do it. And you recently bought 21 acres about 45 minutes west of Austin. So I want to talk all about villages, DAOs, and what you're thinking and how you're researching this space, how you're thinking about building this out in your own way. So just tell us, give us the elevator pitch, give us the TLDR. What is your vision? What are you looking to build?
Okay, so the high level vision is I kind of see the future of cities moving toward, people talk about decentralized cities, distributed cities, and the way I've been thinking about that is sort of, aligning incentives. How do you get aligned incentives within a city? And so, sort of, I think like common ownership of a piece of property, sort of like a co-op or something like that. So if you have a bunch of these co-ops that make up a city, each co-op, they can have its own culture, have its own building styles. It can, if it's on crypto, it can experiment with its own, economic system. There could be libertarian ones, there could be communist ones. And so that's sort of the idea, is that there can be a bunch of these like different neighborhoods that are all kind of DAOs, and they all own their own, they all own their land, and they all have their own little economic system. And I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do there where, if one, I call them neighborhood DAO, if one neighborhood DAO does like a token swap with its neighbor, or just buys tokens of its neighbor, it's pretty interesting, I think, because then you get, some economic upside in your neighbor, you get some voting rights over your neighbor. So I think there's a way to rethink these like incentives within cities, sort of get rid of the NIMBY impulse. I think it's a way, you could think of like trading air rights, it's making everything a market. And I think crypto, there's a big potential here to make cities more of a market, where, everything is economic, and you can, sell rights, buy rights, have different voting mechanisms and stuff like that.
Right. It's kind of interesting to think about the HOA as kind of like a proto DAO in a certain way, because HOAs, housing associations, are kind of an attempt to align incentives. They create some structure for it, kind of like public goods within a particular neighborhood. But then they do seem pretty liable to NIMBYism, and they can only align the incentives so much, right? So in a way, it's like a village DAO or a neighborhood DAO is kind of like a radicalization of the HOA in a way, and giving it much more kind of formalism and liquidity and different types of financial tools, really, to like build that out in kind of more interesting ways, right? So yeah, so tell us more in concrete detail, like tell us about the property that you bought. Tell us about how you think about building this out.
Okay, so yeah, I just talked about the general idea, and so the specific implementation is called Montanoso. And so I'm thinking like a little traditional village, like an old, Italian town or something, or, something you'd find in Europe, where it's a small town, it's walkable, there's no cars within the town itself. So yeah, I bought 21 acres, 45 minutes west of town in hill country. Part of the reason that property appealed to me is because, one, it's next door to CabinDAO, it's also doing a decentralized city. So there's a lot of interesting, overlap or potential there for collaboration.
Right. Shout out to the CabinDAO people. By the way, why don't you give people just the summary on that project? It's kind of interesting. How does that work?
They're building a decentralized city. And the way they're doing it is they have a piece of land as well, which they've been offering to online creators to come stay out there. This season, they've been letting a lot of crypto people stay out there. And so they're trying to figure out how to incorporate more properties throughout the world. And so basically, I think the idea is that you can if you have a property you want to contribute to the Cabin network, you can bring it in here, and they're working on the token incentives for how that works. And
right, we'll get Jonathan on the podcast for sure eventually, I'm sure. So something to note here for people listening is that it's like what you're building with Montanoso, it's not this like super abstract, random, isolated idea, pie in the sky, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's right next to CabinDAO, so there's already some critical mass emerging. People don't necessarily know this, but out in Johnson City, there are already these things happening. And actually, we have a lot of friends in that area who are buying houses, maybe not right on that plot of land where you and Jonathan are, but around there. So there is this kind of weird, interesting, kind of diffuse, proto urban formation in a way. Urban's not quite the right word, but there's like this weird kind of like spread out proto metropolitan kind of thing going on in that part of the hill country, which I don't think anyone really knows about this yet.
I'd love to see more DAOs or people doing weird stuff like this, buying land out there and creating like a weird community of crypto enthusiasts.
It seems like it's already emerging. So I just wanted to give that as context for people. It's not like you just like picked a random place on the map where there's no one within miles. This is like already an emergent geography for this type of thing. And, the CabinDAO, like they're booked up nonstop. The one house on your property is already, you collaborate with the CabinDAO people, right? And you're already getting overflow from CabinDAO just about every night right now, right?
Yeah, I was like node 1 or something they called it, like
Okay.
the first additional property, and I've been, renting it out to Cabin. They pay me on chain. It's kind
Yeah,
of cool.
that's awesome. Yeah, so this is not like some pie in the sky thing. There's a ton of demand for this, and it's already there, and it's already emerging in that part of Johnson City. Okay, so fascinating. We're just kind of setting the scene for people. So you have one house on the property right now, and what is the next step? Are you going to have to raise capital? What are you going to build next? What is the sequence that you'll pursue to build this out and make it, a financially viable, phenomenon?
There's a few things I'm pursuing in parallel right now. First of all, it's building a community of people that are interested in this. So getting like families together that might want to move out there. It is hard to be out there full time just because you are kind of far from things. And so I think if you get 3 or 4 families out there to start with, I think that would be good. Little critical mass, have company, and have interesting events. Also, probably we'll start looking for people to invest soon. And then also trying to figure out like what the first buildings we will build are. So there's, like you said, there's already a house. So I'll probably want to build like a couple more houses on there, and then maybe like a small office building, like a little schoolhouse for the families. I think the main thing is the housing. And get a few more houses on there so people can live out there. And then while those are being built, work with the potential residents to figure out, what's the next priority of what we should build out there.
Right. Okay. And have you done a lot of research on things like materials and housing designs? And what is your perspective on the best way to build this type of little village in terms of the concrete materials and designs and stuff like that? How far along are you on that, or do you have any interesting takes or opinions on that?
Yeah, I'd like to use local, sort of traditional materials like stone and brick. I think that's important because if you're going to be living in close proximity to other people, you want it to be soundproof. And I think a lot of these materials, they help like sound dampen, so you can be a really nice, quiet community. Also, it kind of acts as a heat buffer. So I think you want to be somewhere where it's pleasant. You're not just being baked in the sun like on asphalt.
Right.
So if these help absorb the heat during the day and release it during night, it kind of helps buffer the temperature. Yeah, and just like lots of soundproofing, traditional materials.
Right. And so, okay, so let's unpack a little bit about how you see kind of the financial architecture, like how do you plan to design the economic relationships? How are you thinking about this? I told you shouldn't drink bubbly water on the podcast.
Yeah, so I guess the idea is that the DAO is sort of the it kind of runs everything. The DAO will rent. Eventually, there will be a DAO. There's no DAO yet, but eventually the DAO will rent the land from an LLC, I think, that owns it for the short term, probably. And then, so you rent from the DAO. So what you do is you buy an NFT that represents your lease of a building, and that gives you the right to live there. You put in money every month or however often you want to top it up, and so your money goes to the DAO. The DAO pays the LLC, and then the DAO takes care of running the village and stuff like that.
And so the NFT that you buy to be a leaseholder, is that like limited in time, or it's just like whoever has possession of the NFT is the leaseholder at that time? So the NFT would trade back and forth among whoever is going to be moving in and out?
Yeah, I think you could probably design the contract so that it always goes back to the village after the end of the lease. I think the village could probably like yank it if it needs to. It's just sort
but
of.
do I have the right idea that the tenant of a property would be in possession of the NFT, and if they're no longer a tenant, then they would transfer the NFT in some way?
Right.
Right.
It's kind of weird now because there's going to be legal documents in addition to the NFTs, so it's like which one takes priority? Probably the legal document at the end of the day. But I think over time, maybe the NFT can have more rights assigned to it.
And so, is there a reason you can't you can't go full crypto on this? I guess because it's just too risky. That would be too risky. Like you need legal entities.
I mean, we could. I could be the enforcer, and if you don't have an NFT, I just kick you out of your home. But like, I mean. Yeah, we could try something like that.
You could do like the locks on the door are like contingent on having the NFT. So right, so it's like the
Right.
NFT is literally the key to the place.
I have mixed feelings about these digital locks.
Why?
We just don't want to like lose power or whatever. I had one in Miami and it was always like not working and failing. But the cabin actually has a product that's like a little card or whatever, which I think has a wallet on it. So you can put an NFT on there and then it gives you access to things, I believe.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm talking about, right? So like it could just be like whoever, like it's a bearer asset. Like it basically the ownership of the rental could be like a bearer asset. If you have the fucking NFT, you have control of the house that you are renting. And if I kill you and take it from you, then it's my house now.
We could try that.
Okay, interesting. And so are you thinking about this on like a are you going to think about doing like farming or like making it like a productive place, or no, like everyone's just going to have like internet incomes and like it's like software engineers making money off the internet, and the land itself is not like the village itself is not necessarily producing value off the land or anything like that.
I don't think it's going to be like a primary source of income. I imagine a lot of the residents will be people with internet jobs. Maybe it'd be great if we had people that want to build the village and also live in the village. Like a stonemason or something. I think that'd be amazing. But generally, yeah, I think the land is not like super productive. The hill country, I think there's not there's not a lot of great soil. It's a lot of clay and stuff and like limestone. So I don't know how much plant or animal life it can support.
Right.
So you get like some cows and stuff, and I want to plant like a wildflower meadow and maybe get some bees. So it can support a little bit of industry, like craft industry, but like we're not going to feed ourselves from the land.
Right. That's not the idea. Right. Okay. And so I think people listening can understand the idea and the appeal of using things like NFTs as leases, basically, like using a token as representation of ownership for something for some amount of time. I think that makes intuitive sense. Now, one of the big attractors, I think, for DAOs and all of these new experiments in Web3 is also the idea of kind of accumulating a stake in things, accumulating ownership, distributing the value that's created by a community to the community itself. And so I know you've given some thought to how to do that over the longer term. How do you think about that, and how does that kind of mix in?
Yeah, so one of the things I think about, like this co-op model we talked about briefly, is sort of like a hybrid ownership model where you rent the lease the apartment, but then also you can have like a ownership of the community as well, so that you can sort of acquire more of the community as you contribute value to the community. It becomes more desirable. Tokens, you want to like buy these tokens, and then as you contribute to the community, the token maybe goes up in value or something. And I also think it's interesting if you hold these tokens and you can then stake them on your lease, get a discount on your rent. So that way, the more you own, the cheaper your rent, up to a certain amount. You still have to pay taxes and there's still maintenance and stuff like that. But I think that's an interesting model, because then you can sort of decide how much you want to rent versus how much you want to own, and you can adjust that over time based on your needs. There's a lot of interesting stuff there where if you die, you can give half the tokens to each of your kids, and then like they don't have to worry about trying to split a house up or whatever. And then also, if you own these tokens, you can move within the community and not have to sell your home. You just rent a new home, maintain the ownership of the token. As life circumstances change, you can keep the ownership.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It sounds really attractive to be able to. It's kind of like the rent to own model, almost in a way, right? Because as you're renting, you're accumulating something that kind of represents a share, right? Like obviously it's not a security, but it at least within that kind of internal economy, it represents a kind of stakeholding that should appreciate in value over time, even though, right? I mean, even though we're not saying that it's going to appreciate in value over time.
Yeah, I mean, so like,
not a speculative asset. This is not financial advice. It's a utility token, right? And a governance token, right?
Right. So yeah, definitely there's going to be governance rights associated with it. You can vote on the what to do with the community. I think especially for the early residents, you do want to give out tokens for people that live there, because they're taking a risk, uprooting themselves and moving to a small community, and they're providing a lot of value by like bootstrapping this community. And so I think for the early residents, for sure, definitely you want to give them tokens for living there. Over time, debatable. You might just want to have it just stop the inflation and just let people buy them as many as they want, or
right. It's kind of like right. It's like airdropping to early users to incentivize early risk taking, early adoption. But then once it reaches takeoff and becomes sufficiently valuable and viable on its own terms, then you would wind that down.
And the token holders can decide this. So they can put it up to a vote. I imagine you could do a vote based on just pure token ownership. You can do some sort of weird quadratic voting thing where you have even though you have a lot more tokens, you don't necessarily get a lot more votes. You can also incorporate the NFTs, so the people that live there that actually lease the place, even if they don't own any tokens, get a pretty big vote because
Right.
they're actually living there and it's their life. So
Right.
there's a lot of interesting things I think you can do with governance that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so, how do you see the landscape of tooling? Like, how do you see the Village DAO stack? Like, what tools are you using here? How do you envision this community actually kind of executing its governance and its arrangements in this way? Are we talking like, yeah, just I'm curious, give us a sense of like what are we using here? Is it Discord servers and Gnosis safes, or is it like the Syndicate DAO, or like there's just like this interesting landscape of different tools and competing frameworks. I'm just curious if you've how far you've gotten in thinking that stuff through.
I think the DAO won't come until probably later this year, early next year. The actual on-chain component. So the stuff moves so quickly, so it's hard to say exactly what it's going to look like. I'm kind of hoping some of these like zero knowledge layer 2s will launch soon, because then all the transactions will get a lot cheaper. I don't want people to have to pay $100. You don't want to have $100 fee to pay your rent. So hopefully you can move to like a layer 2 that makes everything cheaper. For voting, probably just like snapshot voting to start out with, something like that. For the discussion groups, I think a lot of it will happen in person eventually, but right now I'm not a fan of Discord. It's too noisy. You get all these randos coming in, trying to scam you or ask when moon. So actually the discussion group's on Urbit. I figured, Urbit, it's quiet, it's a nice barrier to entry. So you want people to have to do something to be a part of the community. You don't want just like randos coming in and ruining things.
Right.
Because I don't want to spend a lot of time talking. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like all these Discords, they're just people shooting the shit or whatever.
Totally.
And that's pretty boring. So
Yeah, totally. All right, awesome. Urbit Maxi Village DAO. I'm into it.
but I also think there's other interesting things you can do as well. Like there's things like Rary, which is like a lending market. So you can deposit your token and borrow stable coins against it. So I think it'd be interesting if you sort of tie this lease in. So if let's say you deposit your community token as part of your lease to get a discount on rent, but then also you have that deposited, then you can borrow cash against that. So you can take out cash if you need to. You could probably use that for a little bit of leverage, where you take out cash and buy more of the tokens. So I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do there, where you plug into like this DeFi landscape all the different tools people are building.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's kind of like how now, man, it's so funny. I just said fascinating the third time. My wife this morning was listening to one of my podcasts. She was like, "You say the word fascinating way too much," and now I can't ignore it when I do it. So it's interesting to me how a common practice now is like, if you buy a home, well, not now, like millennials, because they've been priced out of homes, but for the boomers who own homes, something that boomers do is they'll take out a line of credit on their home, or they'll like refinance or whatever. And if you bought a home a long time ago and it's appreciated in value, you can basically cash out some of that value and do stuff with it. So you can imagine the Montanoso Village DAO basically doing this, but with like DeFi rails, which that is actually really cool when you start to think about what you could do as a community, because it's not just you, it's now you and a bunch of other people who also have a stake in the village. You could all, you could all decide to borrow against the value of the whole village if you wanted to, right?
I imagine that's part of the way that the village will help fund new buildings and stuff, is they'll just borrow against their tokens, build the new building, and then then that building has a cash flow. So there's potentially you can sell off that cash flow, or you can just issue more tokens. There's a lot of ways I think you can start funding it once it's up and running.
So what are some of the most inspiring examples that you know of, or what are previous case studies that you take the most kind of knowledge and inspiration from?
In terms of like
just like other projects that you've seen that you think are doing a good job of this, or just I'm curious, like maybe where you got the idea from, or like what out there before now have you seen or looked at where you're like, oh, okay, this can be done, this is possible, and I'm learning from this or learning from that.
Not sure. I think a lot of it was just kind of I came to from first principles. I feel bad using that phrase, but like just thinking about like incentive design in cities and what the problem is, and like kind of coming to this model of a village or whatever. But I think there's, co-ops exist. That's a thing. I've never lived in one. I've been on an HOA board, so I know sort of what that's like.
Right.
But I think, sort of just like little village projects, like there's places like Seaside, Florida. There's like developments in Charleston, Cat Fiddle Street. I think there's a lot of these like small urban developments that I've been inspired by.
Right.
But in terms of like crypto co-ops, that sort of thing, I don't really know. I feel like there's a lot of things doing this right now, like a lot of regenerative Web3 type things.
Right.
So we all seem to be kind of approaching the problem, and we all have our own little aspects we're doing, but there's a lot of people that are in sort of the same vein, I think.
Right. And so what do you think is the biggest challenge or pitfall? Like, if you're back on the podcast in 5 years and this fails badly for some reason, what would that reason be? What's the most likely way for this to go off the rails or never get off the ground or perhaps go down in flames? Like, what's the biggest risk or threat or challenge to this type of project?
I feel like just getting buy-in from people. I think it's pretty weird. I mean, so much of the society is built around home ownership, home mortgages. You can get really cheap rates on a home mortgage. All the tax incentives are for buying a single-family home, and to a lesser extent condos. And so, if sort of all of the institutions are against something novel in this regard, I think that would be one of the big challenges. It's just like, how do you convince people that actually this is interesting to like try to live and experiment? For most people, like their home is their biggest investment, and like all their net worth. So it's like, how do you convince people to try something new? But a lot of people don't have homes now, so maybe they rent. So like for them, maybe it's not as big of a deal. They can just keep renting out in the country or whatever, and slowly acquire a share of the community.
Right.
Also, I think that'd be a big problem, just like convincing people to move out there, try something different. There's a big draw to being in the city, I think.
Have you looked at CabinDAO? What do you make of that project?
I went to some of the early calls. I haven't been following them as much recently. But from what I understand is that they bought some land. I think they went the Wyoming DAO route and they acquired some land, but it's like marginal land, in Wyoming. I don't know how much you can actually put out. I don't know how much you can do with it if people want to live out there. So I appreciate that they're sort of pushing the envelope in terms of what an on-chain entity can do. But I also think they're just like selling individual lots on the land. Like, you just buy like, a square of the land or whatever, which I think is not really that's not as interesting because that's almost just like a subdevelopment, and we already have subdevelopments. I think sort of like a novel co-op model is more interesting, at least for me.
Yeah. Do you know, I wonder, like, is anyone doing stuff in Wyoming on these plots of land? Or is it just like these digital tokens that people are buying and selling? Do you know? I'm just curious.
I think they maybe planted the flag, and I think they hid some like a treasure or something, or a medical kit on there or something. I don't know the details.
It's very interesting. You mentioned before zero knowledge proofs. It's kind of interesting to think about like where all this goes in the long run when we have really good zero knowledge proofs are ubiquitous. Like, you can imagine a village DAO where there's no knowledge of the identity of any of the people living there. So like, I own a house in Montanoso, but you don't know who I am exactly, and there's nowhere traceable my identity. That's kind of crazy to think about. Like, we might have these like truly autonomous, sovereign little city states in the middle of the Texas Hill Country that's literally opaque to all law enforcement. Right?
Yeah, I think also like for voting too, you might not want to have your neighbors know how you voted on something.
Right, it's like secret ballots you'd want. Yeah, it's interesting, right?
If you're voting to punish your neighbor for violating the rules or whatever.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I guess the way that your model is different than CabinDAO is like CabinDAO wants to do a bunch of different properties distributed around, right? And the DAO kind of represents ownership in the whole kind of distributed web of properties, whereas you have a much more local attitude, right? You want you don't want people coming in and out. Ideally, you want people building long-term relationships, and really having a long-term stake in the good of the health of the village. So is that like a strategic consideration, or is that just kind of your preference? Like, I'm curious if there's if that's an opinionated aspect of this, and you think that that's like a necessary way to make this sort of thing succeed, or is that just a preference of yours?
Well, it's both.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people like they want community. I feel like, especially after the pandemic and everything, and some of the chaos around that, I think people really want a community that they can just seeing the same people every day. I think there's a lot of value in that, and also a lot of these things like I feel like they work best in a high trust environment. So like if you're going to be, issuing token bounties for doing some project or whatever, it's very easy. If you live in the town, you can see the project that's being done. You know your neighbors, and like if they did the project and how much it's worth to you or whatever. So let's say you give them a bounty of tokens. But if you have this global network of villages, some village can just kind of go rogue and be like, oh, we're going to do this. It's going to improve the value of this land this much. You should give us a bounty. And then, who knows really what's going on. There's, I have to be more careful about sort of, there's sort of these trust issues that come into it. And there's probably ways to figure it out. But I think having like a village of people that know each other, that are sort of in it for the long haul, I feel like that's one of the goals of this project is just to be, even when I was young, like I liked the Long Now Foundation. So like just thinking, 1,000 years in the future. I think it'd be interesting to build a village that you can imagine being around in 1,000 years, like our descendants or whatever. Really well-built buildings. It's a community that's been built, maybe famous people. We raise like the next famous, the new elites come out of here and we take over, the boomer institutions or whatever. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff you can, I don't know, everyone's building for like digital nomads. And there's a certain type of people that become digital nomads, but I think a lot of people, they just want to be, have a community, be a digital settler. They might have a remote job, but they just work, they work and then they have their community. And they're not traveling all the time. They, have a place to call home.
Yeah.
They can invest in the community.
Digital settler. I like that as opposed to digital nomad.
And I think just having like, I think living on the land and then living on a piece of land and just investing in it yourself, like through like physical work or whatever. I think a lot of people, especially a lot of digital like knowledge workers, sort of crave that. Like a lot of these people want to move out to do some physical projects in the real world. Because you write software, it's very inferior. Kind of maybe the project's deleted in 2 years, it gets canceled. But if you build like a staircase or you build a little trail or something or plant a tree, that's going to be there for 100 years. Like in software, I guess crypto might be around in 100 years because nothing ever deletes these little pieces of stuff on chain, but it's definitely physical in a way that software and some of this knowledge work isn't.
Yeah, it's true. I think there's a lot of people out there right now who, they make a good chunk of change through being a software engineer, or maybe they just got rich from owning Bitcoin or whatever. But there's kind of a lot of people, I would say, out there now floating around in our circles who have a good chunk of money, but they feel kind of isolated and they feel kind of just generally dissatisfied with their everyday life, with the actual structure of their life. And so a lot of people now will talk about, they want to start a farm or they want to live off the land or whatever. This is like a common thing to talk about. But it does seem like a big problem with a lot of those efforts and a lot of those tendencies is, people go off and do their own thing and then they're kind of just like isolated but in nature, or they're like they have this cool country house or a cool farm or something like that, but then they're maybe they're a little bit closer to nature, but they're still kind of isolated and atomized and a bit alienated. So yeah, I think that there is a massive opportunity. I think like some people are going to figure this out. I hope it's Montanoso. I hope it's other people I'm friends with who are going to figure this out. But there seems to be massive demand for some type of significantly improved kind of community living. The downside, of course, is the downsides are well known, right? It's like it's the well known situations where like bad roommates and like that. A lot of people, when they hear you talk about like village DAOs or whatever, they're like communism. This sounds like communism. This sounds like socialism, or it sounds like a cult. And so I think those are the well-known pitfalls that people are kind of allergic to. But I do think that there's a way to get this right, and some people are going to figure it out soon, and there's going to be a massive demand for it. And yeah, I could absolutely see in like 20 years, this is the norm. This way of living is the norm for educated, sophisticated people. Just because I think the benefits that you get to your own life, to your children's life, and the financial benefits as well, are just good. They're going to be astounding if you can get it right, if you can avoid the pitfalls.
Speaking to what you said a little bit, I think one of the benefits is, it's nice to be when I go out there, I'm like very relaxed. It's just very nice out there to get away from the city. But it's a little bit lonely sometimes. You don't want to be out there all the time.
Right.
And I think that's the benefit of having a village, is that it's very dense. So you're close to your neighbors. You run into people. You can have conversations. But then you're just, 5 steps away, or 1 minute away from nature. So you can go hiking through, trails and stuff, and be in trees and everything. And I think it's sort of, you want that balance of the two. Hyper urban, hyper rural. You don't, no suburbs in between. You just go from a city to like a rural environment.
Right. Well, what I'm really hoping for is going to happen soon is flying cars, because that would be a game changer. Because already for me, I'm interested in this kind of thing. I would love to, think very hard about joining you out in Montanoso with my wife and little baby. But now I have this podcast studio here, right? So I have all this business downtown, which is awesome.
We'll build you a podcast studio there. It's fine.
That's true. Yeah. But you get my point. And this is going to be true for a lot of people, right? The downtown core has a lot of people's business and work and relationships. So one of the big inhibitors for this type of project is just the distance and the time it takes to get. But that's probably going to close. That distance is going to close over time with things like flying cars. And so if we get flying cars soon, it's going to be a massive boost to these types of projects. It's interesting just to think about how technological innovations are going to change the cost benefit calculus. And there are certain technologies that are going to make this sort of thing, building a village DAO 45 minutes outside of the city. Soon, 45 minutes is going to be 20 minutes or maybe even 10 minutes. And if that happens, it really changes the entire rational calculus for this kind of thing. And it would be a major boon to this type of project. So other things as well, like Starlink, right? Your place is not that far out of civilization, so it's not relevant there. But there are a lot of technologies that.
We need better internet there.
Oh, you do? Okay.
We're going to get Starlink at some point.
So yeah, my point here is just kind of thinking about how, to a lot of people, this stuff sounds kind of speculative. It sounds kind of, a little bit too much of a stretch to move out 45 minutes outside of the city. It sounds too weird, too crazy, too unlikely. But you can count a bunch of different technological innovations that are happening, that are getting better and better over time, that will actually make that an easier and easier decision to make.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I pivoted towards more rural villages, because I was originally thinking more. My original idea was a megacity. Very hard to get started with that. Capital costs are insane.
Right.
But then just thinking about the technologies that are coming, like you said, flying cars, Starlink, solar, batteries, wells, septic. You can get pretty close to an off-grid, solution here, and it's gonna make rural living, I think, a lot better. You're gonna feel a lot more connected, but you'll still be able to be in nature. You'll be able to traverse vast distances,
right?
And especially for places where the physical distance isn't very far, by the way the bird crow flies, but maybe there's a body of water or something. So, in Seattle, the Yakima Peninsula or whatever it's called, it's 3 miles away from Seattle, but it's an hour-long ferry ride. So if you just take a 5-minute flying taxi ride, all of a sudden these lands, it's gonna do big changes to the price of land market, I think, as sort of these new transportation technologies take off.
Maybe I'll just go full Elon and I'll propose that we do a tunnel from Montanoso to this building right here, and I'll raise the capital and I'll fund it, and I will build it myself. That'd be pretty sweet. Supersonic speed tunnel. That would increase
Hyperloop.
Hyperloop, yeah. Okay, so you mentioned megacities. What is that exactly?
Oh, just giant cities.
But people do this as on a startup model, or?
So there's the city of Tolosa. They're kind of trying it. I don't know how far that's gonna get. So maybe.
Where's that?
I think I want to say Nevada, but I feel like there might have been a few places in the running.
Have you been to Prospero?
Prospero? I haven't been there.
We should go.
Sean Pauly has been trying to get me to come down to check it out.
I want to check it out. Yeah, we should go. We should make a video for the channel about it.
That'd be fun. A little other life trip to Honduras.
Yeah, well, I mean, this stuff is so interesting right now. A lot of people are really interested in all these different types of experiments. Are there other projects out there right now that you think are particularly worth watching or interesting? How about charter cities? Do you think that people are going to figure that out, or are you skeptical of that model?
I'm pretty bullish on charter cities. It's hard because it's like, no one wants to give up their governance, right? I think I think in the U.S., like, I think we have generally pretty good laws at the federal level. There's ways to improve it. Don't get me wrong, like, it could be way better, but like we're not as in need of charter cities in the U.S. as they are in some of these other countries. I think where the U.S. lacks is our municipal governments aren't very good. So that was sort of the impetus and the drive to build a megacity. Is like, what if we built a city that was like very well run, very large. And I think there's a lot of technologies right now that can make living in a mega city a lot better too. Like, if you move all the logistics underground, with the delivery robots, having all that underground so the streets can just be for people. I think you make like a much better city and just get, and do a clean start so you get away from all the corruption and the special interests that exist in these big cities.
Right.
Because, we have like New York, but it's kind of corrupt. It's expensive. I think, if you built a mega city from scratch, and you were able to convince people to move there, I think you could have very cheap rents, have like housing abundance. It could be very efficient because everything is just moved by robots, and then the streets you could just take, bicycles and scooters around everywhere.
In the ideal world with maximum development of Montanoso over a long timeline, what do you think is like the maximum capacity for a fully developed Montanoso in terms of like how many buildings, how many people would be living in the village?
I'm thinking somewhere around like 15 to 20 homes, like, because I want to do a hilltop community. It's sort of, physically, geographically limited. And I think since we're, pretty close to Austin, I think we can kind of, take advantage of the benefits that Austin has. And so, you don't necessarily need as much in the village itself. But I would love to build, if this works, this model works, I would love to do another village somewhere that's like 150 homes, 200 homes, that we can get more of like a local economy going. So we just have to prove this one works, and then we can start spinning off.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting from my perspective, as a writer, and with my internet community, I am kind of intrigued by how the internet communities are going to increasingly go IRL. Like, I've done different events you've come to, like we did Base Mansion for the second time this year, second time ever that we did it this year, and you came out to that, and people love this kind of stuff. It's really, really fun when you have like internet friends from all over the country or even the world, and you just do like a meetup somewhere, and you're just like, all right, everyone who wants to come, just hop on a plane. We'll all meet. We'll rent it. Like I do. Like, I rent a mansion on Airbnb, and it's super fun. It's super interesting, and to me, that feels like an obvious vector that people are going to be doing more and more. They're going to be pushing down that path more and more. And so I think a lot about this, like, what would this look like? How should I think about navigating this? And I know Montanoso is more of, you want a more village vibe, you want committed families, you want long-term compounding relationships, which I think is a great idea and a great model. I totally do. But I also like to think sometimes about, how do you have an internet community of people all over the world where there can be there can be a kind of IRL network of spaces where you can meet periodically. So like, if you even just look at Base Mansion, we've done it two times, 2 years in a row. I just rent a mansion each weekend. Like, that is successful enough, and people love it enough that, well, I could easily imagine as a community, like, buying a house or something somewhere, right? And we just own it, and we just use it like twice a year to do like meetups. It could very well kind of pay for itself just doing that. Plus, maybe I hire an operator to like Airbnb it or something in the meantime. Like, that probably is a fairly standard. That's going to be financially viable, just to use it as kind of like a conference space for the community, and then an Airbnb or whatever. So I think a lot about this, like, because I want to think more creatively down this path. I'm just curious. I know it's kind of getting out of your wheelhouse now. This isn't what you're working on, but do you ever think about this, or how would you, if you were me and you had this kind of like internet community that likes to do IRL stuff, like, how would you think about building that? How do you think people are going to experiment with that?
Well, instead of just doing an annual base mansion, you could do a continual rolling base village.
Right.
If you get like the way I think about it, so you're talking about what my influences were. One of them, I'm going to butcher this. It's like Chautauqua or Chappaqua.
Okay.
Something in New York, I think. But basically, they have like it's like a small town, and they have like this big festival for like a couple months. I think every summer. And so I think there's options like this. If you have a place where people live, a bunch of interesting people live, maybe they write weird stuff on the internet or whatever, an intellectual community. But then also there's guest rooms in the community as well. So you can just have, guest speakers and internet friends come out, and stay for a week or two or a month or something, and just have like, sort of this rolling intellectual influence that just comes through the community. It doesn't have to be, it can be family, it can be friends as well. But I think also having, guest speakers and guest, intellectuals and stuff coming, and like giving talks for the community, collaborating with people that live in the community. I think that would be pretty fascinating. That'd be an interesting idea.
Right. So kind of like Montanoso model, but for a more kind of recurring cast of characters coming in and out. So it's kind of the same logic, but it doesn't necessarily need to be long-term families.
I think you'd want like a stable community there, and not just only do. Though I guess the way I was describing it, have a stable community plus this rolling group of people.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like
well.
almost like, so you have a village of, let's say, 15 families, 15 houses, but like 2 of them are like guest houses or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
There's going to be guest homes and guest units at Montanoso.
Right. Okay.
So that family and friends and other people can come.
Okay, so that is already how you're seeing Montanoso, like a stable set of committed families building compounding relationships over time, but some amount of the space is kind of reserved for visitors, guests, maybe you bring in speakers or whatever, that kind of thing. You could do that with Montanoso.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how large the community is or what sort of vibe it goes for, it could bring in intellectuals, you could bring in musicians do a show, or collaborations. You could do like a chef. If you have like a little commercial kitchen, the chef could come in for a week or two and like just so you have like a rotating chef.
Right.
I think there's a lot of different ways you could go with this. You have like artists in residence. You can just have, and the village could sponsor this too. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to like rent it out to that person. Right. The village could just use their funds and say, okay, we're going to sponsor you for a week or two to come live here and just chat with the community and hang out. I think there's a lot of options with that.
Yeah, totally. I know you did a lot of research for when you were like planning this and thinking about doing it. You did a lot of research on where to do it. To share your thought process there and what you were finding in your research and how you ultimately made the decision to do this in Texas. Because I know a lot of people make the case that the best place to do this type of thing is X, and people have different answers for X. How did you think that through? And I'm just curious if you had any observations when you were doing that.
I think to get started, it's hard to bootstrap a community like this. So, it's probably gonna be, the first ones are probably gonna be pretty small, or at least small for the first few years. And so it is beneficial to, I think, be near a larger city, because then you get that, you can sort of, take advantage of their amenities and their cultural stuff. And then there's just the, the normal stuff like, does it have water? And then I guess the other big thing is, sort of regulations. And one thing that appealed to me about Texas is that, basically it's anything goes here. It's like a pretty free state. I did a lot of research in Washington where I'm from, and they have, if you want to build like a rural thing, there's all these rules about, like, 'cause they don't want people to build out there. They want to preserve it as rural land and farms and stuff. And there's sort of things you can do. You can make it like a resort. There's like resort exemptions. But basically, yeah, like a lot of places just have tons of rules about development. And Texas, from what I can tell, seems to be one of the more free states in terms of that. And especially once you go out a few counties and you're in unincorporated land, just county land, like it's anything goes out there. So hopefully, if you want to try weird urban experiments, it seems to be a good place to be, I think.
Right. People might not realize that Johnson City is of LBJ fame. That's the city that basically Lyndon B. Johnson like founded, or
I don't know the details.
Okay,
his childhood home is there, but I don't know beyond that.
Right. Anyway, that's the Johnson in Johnson City is Lyndon B. Johnson. So it's pretty cool kind of lore. It's cool lore for the Village DAO. Cool. Well, where can people find more about Montanoso? It's just montanoso.xyz, is it?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then on Twitter at MontanosoTX.
Nice.
So just search for Montanoso. I think we're on the first page of Google results now if you search for Montanoso, and then everything just links to each other. We're on Instagram,
right on
Twitter,
and I'll put your personal Twitter in the show notes as well if people want to reach out to you. Is that cool?
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure you're open to inquiries if people want to learn more and talk about village DAOs. Yeah.
Yeah, I need more followers. Sure.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for being only the third victim now. No, fourth. You're fourth victim actually. So thanks for coming out. This is interesting. And yeah, if people are, watching or listening and interested in this kind of thing, you should hit up Andrew. We talk about this stuff a lot. I hang out with Andrew a lot in Austin, and I feel like our friend groups are always thinking about this stuff and theorizing it and thinking about the best way to do this stuff. So yeah, anyone interested in this kind of stuff, even if it's just theoretically, feel free to reach out to me or Andrew. And yeah, I think somehow, some way, someone's going to figure this out, and I hope it's you, Andrew.
And if you're thinking about being a potential resident, follow us on Twitter, slide into the DMs. We're looking for people that are interested in that. So
Totally, probably best would be to email, because Andrew's doing different events right now, Zoom meetups and dinners here in Austin and stuff like that. So yeah, Andrew's putting in a lot of work to meet people and connect to the people that are interested in doing this kind of thing. So if that's you, definitely just send Andrew an email or a DM, and he'll bring you in the loop. So yeah, cool. Well, thanks again, Andrew. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My first podcast. So.
Oh, nice, awesome. That's a wrap.